Welcome to my first episode of Jumpstart Distilled. Rob, I'm really glad you're here with me. I have the lovely Rob Derricotte, co-founder and COO of Amblyotech, which was recently acquired by Novartis. Welcome, Rob.
Hey, Eller, how you doing?
I am great.
Thanks
All
for
right.
inviting me. I
Oh my
appreciate it.
God. Of course, it's always great to have a success story from the Jumpstart, portfolio as my first guest. Thank you for agreeing to do this.
Yeah, my pleasure. Excited.
All right, so today we want to talk about, again, kind of the acquisition process with the perspective of you, the founder or a co-founder. But before diving into all of that, can you, just for everyone listening, give a little bit of background on yourself and kind of where you are now post this awesome journey with Amblyotech?
Yeah. Uh, like Eller said, Rob Derricotte. I live in the Atlanta metro area, and I'm a longtime life science business guy. So I'm not a scientist, but I'm a life science business guy. I started in the industry in the very early '90s as a pharma rep, and then moved up into product management and spent most of my career in product management. Worked for Cyril, Pharmacia, Pfizer, and UCB Pharma. In 2006, I decided to leave the corporate world and go out as an entrepreneur, and started actually my first company back in 2006. It was a CME accredited medical education company. And then that was acquired about 3 years after that. Um, and then I worked as a management consultant in the life science business. My had my own consulting firm, and then in 2000, what was it, 2014, we founded Amblyotech.
Yeah, so clearly you have gone through this a number of times, kind of gone through development, through acquisition for life science companies before. And we knew that when we invested in you all, which made you and Joe such an attractive founding team. But what I want to dive into is, your relationship with Joe and kind of, one, how you guys met, and two, what was it about Joe, or maybe more so better framed, about the mix of the two of you, your complementary strengths that made sense for the two of you to go into business for Amblyotech.
Yeah. So it's a really good question. And Joe and I, so here's what's interesting. Joe and I did not know each other before we started Amblyotech.
Yeah.
You know, um, you know, Joe and I had never worked before. I'd only met Joe one other time before we started the company. So why did we go into business together? So anyway, I'll tell you how we met real quick. I used to run this or help run an organization called the Georgia Bioscience Commercialization Center, and it was basically an economic development play for the state of Georgia to help facilitate more life science startups. We had a nice little website and everything, and Joe was moving from Phoenix to Atlanta at the time, and he contacted me. So we'd never met, but he contacted me through the Georgia Bioscience Commercialization Center, sent an email through. I
Yeah.
got the email, and he said, "Hey, can we? I'm a life science entrepreneur. Um, I'd love to meet with you and learn more about what's going on in the Atlanta metro area. I'm on my way here, basically moving. So that's how we met. We met for lunch. Shortly after that, a week or two after the email. We had a lot in common. Life science guys. Didn't talk to Joe for 6 months. Right.
Really?
Yeah. And I get a call out of the blue. Says, "Hey, Rob, this is Joe Koziak. I'm looking at his technology at McGill University. It's really interesting. Would you be interested in, starting a company with me?" And I was like, "Oh, I was a little surprised, flattered but surprised, And I said, "Yeah, I said, "Can you send me some information on what you're looking at?" I looked at the information. It was really, the opportunity was really interesting. We'll get more into that in a second.
Yeah.
So I said, "Yeah, Joe, it's why not? Let's go for it." So I guess it's kind of an interesting lesson in that you don't have to be best friends with a
Yeah.
with your business partner necessarily to And in some cases, maybe it's better to not really know the person. Is there may be a little a higher element of risk in terms of how the relationship's going to work out, but
Yeah.
I think it's less personal in a way, you
Well, I
know?
feel like well, yes, it's less personal, and so it makes it truly, business is business. But what was it maybe then, like, if you don't have if there's higher risk in that founder, that co-founder that you're choosing simply because you don't know them or know too much about them, was it the product that you all saw at McGill and that you reviewed that you were like, okay, yes, this is going to make this work? Kind of, what was there, like a give and take there of like, okay, I know enough about this guy, but we're not best friends. I haven't known him for years, but the product and this opportunity is outstanding. Was there any of that at play?
Yeah, I think in an unspoken way, Eller, I think that was the case probably for Joe and myself in terms of, do I do business? Well, it's funny because Joe approached me. I didn't approach him. So, so maybe, well, I'm sure he had risk too because he didn't know me, but I was flattered at the fact he approached me. But in terms of kind of my assessment of whether I can do business with Joe, I think, Joe and the first thing is Joe and I have complementary skill sets.
Yeah.
Joe is trained as an attorney. He has a law degree. I have a business degree. Um, he has life science experience, more in the business development side, right? Doing deals. Where mine is more, in the area of sales and marketing. So it's, we had complementary skill sets. So I know we wouldn't necessarily be, in each other's domain,
Yep.
so that was helpful. And also Joe being an attorney, I mean, he's good with contracts. He has good contractual instincts,
Mm-hmm.
which is helpful because I don't have that. So that's really helpful. I think the technology played a big factor in it as well.
Yep.
You want me to talk about the technology a little bit just to
Yeah, give
give
everyone just
perspective?
kind of, yeah, give perspective to what Amblyotech is. Yeah.
So Amblyotech was founded from a technology that was developed at McGill University in Montreal. Um, the technology is a treatment for amblyopia. So what's amblyopia? I had no idea what amblyopia was before we started this company. So amblyopia is the medical term for lazy eye.
Yep.
And lazy eye is the treatment options prior to us starting Amblyotech. The patient, the child, usually they're diagnosed, the age of 3. The child has to wear a patch, depending on the severity of the amblyopia, for anywhere from 6 months to 6 years potentially, for anywhere from 2 hours to 6 hours a day. So that was literally the treatment for amblyopia. The other challenge is, kids don't want to wear a patch. Also, it's
Yeah.
just not very effective, right? 25% effective. Um, so so McGill University developed this treatment, where kids and adults could actually play video games on a tablet device where the patient wears 3D glasses, and without going too deep into the science, we could actually we could resolve the condition in 8 weeks. Playing an hour a day of games for 8 weeks, we could get your vision to 2020 or close to 2020.
Yeah, which
So
was
I mean,
insane.
yeah. So that was
Amazing.
like this game, So that alone, I mean, Joe could have been a zombie, and we maybe would still work together because the technology, and not only that, and I think this is an important point to make too, just in general, particularly for entrepreneurs and I know the audience they've already founded their companies, but
Hmm.
I'm just going to say this anyway. If you're looking to found a company from a technology university, the disposition of the inventor is also huge. So
Yeah.
so the third person, and kind of the 3 founders, and I know Joe and I were technically the founders, but Dr. Hess, the inventor of our device at McGill, I mean, he's tremendous guy, very charismatic, very smart, obviously knows the science better than anybody, was great in front of investors. So I mean, so that played into it as well.
Cool. So I think like the really what I'm hearing is that complementary dynamic between business and knowing kind of how to do business development and sales, kind of Joe's experience in life sciences and contractual work and understanding kind of who to best partner with. And then 3 is like just the quality of the product. Like you gotta have that, and you gotta have the core technology down.
Yeah. And the quality of the product, one more thing is and just the quality of the inventor too, because you need the inventor. The inventor has to kind of, even though Dr. has had a day job at McGill, he was pretty much involved in the day to day. And if they're
Yeah.
willing to do that, that's huge.
Yeah, I think that, it's something that we talk about on our application a lot, of like how we really value a technical co-founder on the team. I think I would qualify that as a technical co-founder, the inventor, the person that knows the ins and outs of the technology or product that you're building.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Well, so thank you for the background on Amblyotech. I want to dive into kind of the early days and what they looked like. So obviously you and Joe and Dr. Hess kind of formed together. You have this great technology that's coming out of it, that's built within a university. What were those early steps, or maybe better framed, or the early goals within kind of the 3 of you, that unit? What were the goals that you all set for yourselves, that kind of set the direction of the company in those first couple of months, maybe first 2 years?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, I think given the fact that we had experience, I mean, we kind of had a foundational idea of what kind of what we need to do, in terms of figuring out what our regulatory path would be to get FDA clearance, EU clearance, global approvals, basically. I think just really basic stuff that you need to do to set up the company, or not to set up the company, but set up success so you can actually, launch, so we can launch our device.
Yeah, so I feel so to me, what I see a lot of founders that just they have a cool idea or a cool new technology, like, oh my gosh, wow, we can, help treat lazy eye with a digital therapeutic. Not just like that's an amazing company or an amazing idea, let's get it to market. It's no, how do we, what is the end goal, right? And I think
Yeah,
you, if I'm hearing you correctly, you started with that. How do we actually get it into market,
yeah.
approve?
And
And
if you think,
for
when you,
devices, it's approvals.
yeah, and and I know when you say end goal, I mean that has exit strategy in mind as well, right?
Was it in mind for you all?
Yeah, and I'll give Joe a lot of credit for this. I think Joe was thinking more about the exit strategy than I was, because my background is more in launching life science products.
Yeah.
His is in doing deals. So I think I think he was more. I think he was more the driver of thinking about the exit up front.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't really necessarily talk about hey, we're gonna exit and let's exit in 2 years. I mean, that wasn't
Yeah.
because I think what's interesting about the exit versus the launch is, assuming that you get approval for your device or your product, um, you have more control over your launch than
Yeah.
you do because you can't force a company. I guess there's a couple types of exits, right? You can launch, build a great successful company, and then go public. That's an exit.
Yep.
It's a longer haul, and most startups don't do that, as you know, right?
Yep. Yep.
And then the other exit is just is being acquired by a big company. Um, the startup has little control over the acquisition, right? You can only position yourself for the acquisition, but you can't force a company to buy you.
Yep.
But you can control, launch planning, the execution of that, um, having a strong understanding of the marketplace that you're competing in, so you can position yourself right to drive adoption. All those things, you have more control over that. I think the smart approach is to kind of do both if you can, and I don't know if we really thought about it that way. I mean, I was kind of, like I said, I think Joe was a little more focused on that, but I was a little more focused on the launch side of it. So it kind of strangely worked out. And maybe our instincts, maybe that's another reason, back to your first question about, how did Joe and I sort of pick each other? Maybe kind of, and we never really talked about this, but maybe just instinctually just kind of fell in line like that.
Yeah, and I think that's I mean, what I have witnessed just the working with the 2 of you is that like great dynamic between launch and execution of that, and execution of go-to-market with that mindset of, no, we're launching and going to market in such a way that positions us for someone to say, wow, you are a great acquisition target. Because if you can do the prior really well, like naturally you become a great, target for acquisition. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so I want to switch to, you've obviously, how many years it was, you founded it in 2014 and we invested in 2016. And then after we invested, walk me through a few of those like kind of key steps that, those milestone moments that then led up to, oh, let's talk to Novartis.
Yeah. So let's see. So wow. So after you invested, Novartis, as you know, Eller, Novartis didn't come into play probably 3 years later or so.
Yeah, like 2019.
Yeah. So Joe and I, after we became a portfolio company of Jumpstart, we we spent a lot of our time really trying to raise money. I mean, the money that came from Jumpstart was great. We had to obviously raise more for more, to do more things.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time really on the road talking to VCs and talking to life science companies too, not necessarily as partners, but for corporate investment.
Yep.
And then raising angel money. So I think that's where most of our time was spent. I mean, it's hard to we spent some money doing market research. It's hard to do a lot of well, and we didn't have approval either, right? So we were working to get approval so we could actually launch. I'm a little all over the place here, but I want to focus in on what I want to make sure I'm getting at what you're asking.
Yeah, I guess like those years between 2016 and 2019, kind of, it was focused on fundraising, right?
Yeah.
But then kind of come 2019, what was the intent of that? Let's start a conversation, or let's at least sit down with Novartis. Kind of what steered you to talk to them?
Yeah. Okay. So through this kind of dual approach of finding partners and launch readiness, it's really interesting because Novartis reached out to us. Let's see, but it was probably mid 2018. We got an email through LinkedIn from a business development person at Novartis, and they said, hey, we'd love to meet with you. We've been unbeknownst to us, we've been tracking Amblyotech, and we'd love to meet with you and learn more about your company. So, as you know, Novartis has a research center in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So we met them in Cambridge, and me, myself, and Dr. Hess, and there was a team of, I don't know, 5 or 6 people on Novartis' side, a few business development people, a couple ophthalmologists. We had a really good meeting. Fortunately, Eller, as you know, we had a fair amount of clinical data that was compelling.
Yeah.
So we presented the clinical data, presented kind of the business, really what the business opportunity is, and we were very candid about what we thought the challenges were as well. It's kind of a different. It's not. Novartis, of course, is a pharmaceutical company. We had a medical device. It's kind of different approach for them. We talked about that a little bit. I know, and then we met with them that morning. Then that afternoon, we went to lunch with them, and they said, you guys are more advanced than we thought. Your company's a lot more advanced than we thought you were, and they said, we meet a lot of companies, particularly a lot of digital therapeutic companies. Digital therapeutics is kind of a new thing, right? It's becoming more of a common term now. You're probably hearing more about digital therapy. You're probably looking at more digital therapeutic opportunities yourself, right? At Jumpstart. Yep. So, but 4 or 5
But it was kind of a rise. It was this new kind of way of integrating technology into treatment, and not many people were doing it. And so you had this kind of, I don't know, an interesting edge.
Yeah. Right? And I think what Novartis liked about it is because I think they were a little weary because there's a lot of companies that call themselves digital therapeutics companies, but they don't really have the therapeutic side.
Right.
It's more digital, you know.
Yeah.
We actually resolve I think what compelled Novartis to continue their interest was that we actually, we could actually treat a condition without pills or, biologics or, so that was, I think, really fascinating to Novartis. And another thing too, Novartis has a very young CEO, relatively young, right? And I think he's a visionary and younger and more in tune with kind of the digital world. So I think when this was presented, up the chain, I think he was actually pretty excited about it. Novartis' CEO.
Yeah. No, that definitely helps. All right, so let's talk about that conversation. That we've talked about it before, but the lunch that you had, and then the lunch turned into, well, maybe like we should shift this conversation to acquisition. You've now become an acquisition target. What what was that conversation like, and how did you and your team kind of switch and position yourselves like, okay, wait, now we're switching to acquisition, and what did that mean for you all?
Yeah. So as you know very well, Eller, we were an acquisition target for a year and a half, right?
Yeah.
So
It should be said that it's a process. It takes a long time. And I feel like every founder should know that. That was, I assume, your experience for, a lot of the other companies you've worked for too.
Yeah. I've never founded a therapeutics company, even though I work for pharma companies, right? My first entrepreneurial venture was more, it was more like almost like a service company.
Yeah.
So this is the first time I'd gone through the due diligence, the massive amount of due diligence that goes into play when you are an acquisition target. And I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs, and the assumption is that the company finds you, they like you, and then 3 months later they buy you, and it couldn't be farther from the process is so rigorous, and you learn so much about your company because they dive in so deep into every piece, every nook and cranny of your company. I mean, the IP analysis that goes into play, they look at every single contract to see if it would somehow disrupt the deal or somehow put Novartis at a disadvantage. Clearly the competitive landscape. It's it's incredibly detailed. And I'll say this too. It's really important to have good sounding boards, through that whole process.
Yeah. So I was gonna say, like, clearly that, it's a massive undertaking to have that due diligence be presented to you and say, okay, we need information on all of this. I want to ask you what that was like, just as a workload perspective for you and Joe, and if there were any key players that you kind of brought in that helped you get through that.
Yeah, and I'll take my hat off to you, Eller, because I know you were sounding board to Joe and myself as well as Vic.
Yep.
And Vic has a lot of experience in deals as well. But yeah, so when you think about the infrastructure of a pharmaceutical company, and when you think about R&D and legal and IP, kind of all the things we mentioned, you need the equivalent support on your side as well, right?
Yeah.
To help defend you. And I think, and one of the things that was really key is we had an extraordinary law firm that represented us.
Yep.
And certainly with a company like Novartis, they have internal counsel, but they also have a law firm.
Yeah.
We had a law firm that was literally, tiny Amblyotech that generated zero revenue. I would say we had a law firm equivalent to the juice that Novartis's law firm brought to the table. And that was huge for us because they were able to stand toe to toe when we had, and more on the contractual side of the deal. Our law firm was able to stand toe to toe with their law firm to really protect our position. And that's huge. I can go on and on, Eller. We found a great regulatory consultant
Mm-hmm.
to help us kind of sift through the regulatory risks, because as you know, we didn't have FDA approval. You
Yep.
know that we didn't have European approval. The only geography we had was Canada. You
Yep.
know, so they had to kind of assess the Japanese market, the Chinese market. We had a great regulatory consultant that we brought on to help check those boxes and confirm with Novartis' regulatory strategy. Everything was, we had a consistent approach, and we can actually gain approval in these markets.
Yeah.
Um, it goes on and on, Eller. It's, due diligence is, it was almost like we were employees of Novartis for a year and a half. And we worked for Novartis, almost before we were acquired.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I like to keep these relatively short and sweet. So because we are hosting a live meetup with you in the refinery, going to be fantastic having you in the meetup coming up in March, because you're going to be able to share with founders your experience, kind of bringing on the right people and the right resources around, going through this acquisition process. So, I'd love for you to save all of that knowledge for the meetup so that founders can engage and ask questions, because I think you have great opinions about who to bring along for the ride and how to position yourself for success. But to close things out, because we like to keep these distilled videos kind of short, sweet, to the point, if you were to be giving advice to a founder that is about to go through maybe an acquisition, what is maybe the biggest piece of advice you would give them to sit with and to make sure that they think about or do as they enter those negotiations?
Yeah, yeah. So I think the thing to think about is think about your own cross-functional team, not necessarily the team within your organization, but cross-functionally outside of the organization,
Mm-hmm.
and leverage all of those different cross-functional groups. And cross-functional groups meaning, your intellectual property support, i.e. the IP lawyers, the general counsel that you use, to negotiate the deal. If you have contacts that are business development people in other pharmaceutical companies that you could talk to, so you can understand how they think about
Yep.
doing a deal, on from their side of the table. That's incredibly helpful. And fortunately, having been in the industry for a long time, I did know some of those people that I could talk to and say, hey, when you're doing a deal, how do you think about this piece of it? How do you think about this piece of it? And you're hearing it really right from the source, except with a different company. So that's really helpful, and I think that can give you a big advantage, because you can get some insight. And there's sometimes it's just a small thing that ends up being that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing too is, whoever's looking to acquire you, if you have a champion that's also a friendly, it can kind of give you insight on how the company that's looking to acquire you is thinking about things as well. And that can give you insight on how to position your company so that everything goes smoothly. But just be ready for a long ride, because when a company shows interest, it just means that you have at least a year's worth of work ahead of you.
Yeah.
And if you're lucky, maybe 6 months.
Yeah. I think that's a great place to a good note to end on, and that, like, you have your moment of celebration, of, wow, we're entering into this process. But I mean, Rob, as you and I know, when that first happened to when it actually closed, when you and Joe were like, we're drinking champagne tonight,
Right.
that was about a year apart. Like, so.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Rob, thank you so much for joining and for having this conversation with me. Really great insight. Again, I'm looking forward to the meetup where current Jumpstart founders can kind of come in, ask you about your experience, your knowledge going through an acquisition with a large pharmaceutical company. What did you do? What are the people, the resources? How did you structure conversations? Stuff like that. So looking forward to that. Congratulations again.
Thank you, Eller. I look forward to talking to as many people that wanted to chat with me about their opportunities they're working on. So I'm excited. Thanks for including me.
Of course. Well, I appreciate you giving back, and we'll talk soon.